name, calories, and the category. So as we sort, if we simply move the name alone, we're going to be stuck with different names that don't match with calories, as we said, right? So we need to make sure we don't just move the names around. What can we do if we don't just move the names around? Each one of this is a struct. What's a better way to do it? So here, if you want to swap, let's say these two, right? And eventually that's what we do. We see which one is smaller, which one is bigger, and we swap it. So if we want to swap these two, what we did was just swap the names. What should we do instead?
Swap the address.
You can't swap the address. You're not allowed to do that.
Can you swap an address?
Swap what? The whole struct, which is what we must do. We must take this whole struct and put it in here, and take this whole struct and put it in there. Right? We can have one entity. Remember, what we had was, we had our struct called what? NutriCal. Okay? And what we had one variable, which is an array of that type. Does not mean that you cannot have more variables of that struct, right? So what you can do is have a temporary struct. So this is called NutriCal, same data type, but temp, let's say I call it temp plan or something like that. But it's one struct, which is a placeholder. If you were to swap integers, you'd have an integer placeholder. Now we are swapping struct, so you have a struct placeholder. You take this and put it in here, so you have saved it. Take this and put it in here, and the saved one goes in here, and you have swapped. Now remember, what is it that you can do with structs? You can use the assignment operator, right? And you can simply say this struct equals this struct equals this struct, so you don't have to do that member-wise copy, which is what I did. So I went ahead and wrote the code so we didn't have to go through and do that here. And this one. If we take a look at, here's the sort data. Remember, we started writing this, right? So in NutriCalc.h is where we actually put our, here's my prototype, okay? And if we go look here, so here's what I did. You see that? Let me get the light. Go back to being smaller. Back to 100%. Okay. Make it a little bigger. Okay. So we have the small string is that min that we had to hold the smallest string, and then we have a small index. Index is an integer, so we just set that to be an integer. Created a local struct, meaning a temporary struct to do that swap, which is what that is, okay? And then you go into the algorithm itself. We start with I equals 0, I less than size minus 1. We don't go all the way to size, because remember what we said, if that last entity, if you get to the last entity, we're already done sorting. If you get there and then you increment one more, we'll be in trouble. So we stop with size minus 1, and you set that small index to be that first I value, so you assume that that is the minimum, and then you copy from your array into that min. So you have your min is nothing but that first value. So if this were apple, then your small string is your apple, which is your base point. And then based on that, you're going to go into the next loop and you're going to compare it with the rest of the stuff. So if you look at my text file, this is what we are loading. Wrong mouse. Okay. Okay, so now this is all sorted. Here, let me go ahead and move things around. Get rid of that. Because I tested this a few times yesterday. Okay. So you set the base point to the first one, and compare, then you do your string compare. Okay, string compare of small string, which is that first string, is less than or greater than. So if apple is greater than ice cream, then ice cream becomes the smallest string, which it is not, so it stays there. And you keep going, you go in there. If it is, then you copy the other string into the small string. And you keep doing that until you come out of that loop. When you come out of that loop, you copy the whole struct, which is what we're doing there. You're going to copy the whole struct to say, I want to now swap the two. Right? So instead of just copying one member, you're going to copy the whole struct, which is the right way to do it. And then you just do that. That happens inside of the outer for loop. So every time you move the marker, and you keep going until you get to the last but one element. Okay? So if we do that now, we test it. So the very first thing, it should have loaded from the file. If you do S to sort, it should have sorted it. See, we move things around. Is it sorted? Yeah, it's sorted. Okay? So there's really nothing much to it. As long as you get the algorithm straight, then it's a matter of simply using the string functions as opposed to integer functions. And now that we have the struct, you just have to make sure that you swap the whole struct and not just one data member. Right? Okay. So do you have any other questions before we move on to classes? Okay? All right.